Daniel Cross woke at 4:47 in the morning to the sound of a city that never truly slept. Outside his window, garbage trucks groaned through narrow streets. Sirens wailed somewhere in the distance. The radiator in the corner hissed and clanked, fighting a losing battle against the November cold seeping through single-pane glass that hadn't been replaced since the building went up in 1907. He didn't need an alarm anymore. His body had learned the rhythm of survival, the internal clock that counted down the minutes between sleep and the moment he had to become someone his daughter could depend on. 6 years of this routine had worn grooves into his nervous system deeper than any habit, sharper than any memory from the life he used to live. The apartment was silent except for those city sounds. Maya slept in the only bedroom buried under 3 blankets because the heating barely reached that far. Daniel slept on the couch, had been sleeping there since they moved in, because a 9-year-old girl needed her own space more than a grown man needed comfort. The couch sagged in the middle springs, poking through worn upholstery, but he'd learned which position minimized the stabbing sensation in his lower back. He stood joints protesting. 36 felt like 60 some mornings, especially the cold ones. The scars on his forearms ached with the temperature drop phantom pains that doctors said would fade but never really did. He flexed his fingers, watching them tremble slightly in the pre-dawn darkness. The nerve damage was permanent, they'd told him. Functional, manageable, but permanent. Some days his hands remembered what they used to do, the precision they once commanded. Other days they felt like someone else's hands, entirely clumsy tools attached to arms that had forgotten their purpose. The bathroom mirror showed a face he'd barely recognize anymore. Stubble he'd shave in 20 minutes. Dark circles that never quite disappeared no matter how much he slept. Eyes that used to scan horizons at 30,000 feet now stared back at him with the dull acceptance of a man who'd learned to expect nothing and be grateful for it. He splashed water on his face, the cold shocking his system into full wakefulness. By 5:15, he had coffee brewing, the cheap kind that came in bulk from the discount store, but it was hot and it was caffeine, and that's all that mattered. He checked Maya's homework on the kitchen table, math problems she'd finished last night before bed. Perfect score as always. The girl had inherited her mother's mind, sharp and quick and relentless. Elena would have been proud. Elena would have been a lot of things if she'd lived long enough to see who their daughter was becoming. He made breakfast. Oatmeal with cinnamon and a handful of raisins, the same thing every morning, because routine was cheap and reliable, and Maya never complained. He packed her lunch, half a peanut butter sandwich because a full one meant she'd save half for him, and he needed her to eat more than he needed pride. Apple slices in a plastic bag, carrots that were starting to get soft but not bad yet, a juice box he'd gotten on sale. Maya's door opened at 5:43, exactly as it always did. She emerged in her school uniform, the one he'd bought secondhand but ironed every Sunday night, so it looked almost new. Her hair was tangled, her eyes still heavy with sleep. She patted across the linoleum in socks with holes in the toes, socks he kept meaning to replace, but never quite had the extra $12 for. "Morning, Daddy. Morning, sweetheart. Your oatmeal's ready." She climbed onto the chair, pulled her bowl close. "Did you sleep some?" "That means no. That means some." Maya studied him with those eyes. Elena's eyes, dark and knowing and far too perceptive for a child who should still believe that adults had all the answers. She'd learned young that survival meant paying attention, that the spaces between what people said mattered more than the words themselves. She ate her oatmeal in careful spoonfuls, making it last because she knew there might not be more until lunch. "What are you learning today, history?" "We're doing the Revolutionary War." "Tell me something you learned yesterday." She brightened the way she always did when he asked about school. "Yesterday we learned about Benjamin Franklin in The Kite, how he discovered electricity with lightning. Mrs. Patterson said he was a genius, but also kind of weird because he took air baths." Air baths. He sat around naked to let the air hit his skin. He thought it was healthy. Daniel smiled despite the exhaustion pressing down on his shoulders. "Sounds like Mrs. Patterson's making history interesting." "She makes everything interesting." Her eyes dropped to her bowl. "I wish I could stay in her class forever." "You'll have other teachers." "But what if we move again? What if I have to start over somewhere else?" The question hung between them, heavy with the weight of 3 cities in 5 years. Each time he'd thought they could settle, build something stable, life had found a way to pull the rug out. Landlords who raised rent beyond what he could afford. Jobs that promised stability but delivered layoffs. The constant shuffle of trying to stay one step ahead of homelessness while giving his daughter something that resembled childhood. We're not moving. You said that in Philadelphia. This time it's different. You said that in Baltimore too. He reached across the table, covered her small hand with his scarred one. Maya, look at me. She did, reluctant. I know I've said it before. I know I've made promises I couldn't keep. But I have a job. A steady job. We have this apartment. We're going to stay. Until something goes wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. The lie tasted bitter even as he said it. Something always went wrong. But she needed to believe it, needed to walk into school without the weight of uncertainty crushing her spirit. So he lied, smiled, squeezed her hand gently. Trust me. She nodded, unconvinced but willing to pretend for his sake. I trust you, Daddy. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence. Maya washed her bowl without being asked, dried it, put it away. She'd learned those habits from necessity, from nights when he'd come home too exhausted to do anything but collapse on the couch. She took care of things, this girl who should have been worried about dolls and playground politics instead of whether her father would make it through another day. She packed her backpack, notebook covered in drawings of airplanes, intricate sketches of jet engines, and wing configurations that she'd copied from library books. Pencils worn down to nubs that she refused to throw away because new pencils cost money. A paperback novel from the school library, something about a girl who learned to fly. You're bringing that to work again? Her eyes found his defensive. You said I could stay in the corner by the office. You said as long as I was quiet. I know, He trailed off, guilt settling in his chest like a stone. I wish you could go to the after-school program like the other kids. I don't mind. I get to see where you work. I get to draw the planes. Maya, you shouldn't have to spend your afternoons in a corner because we can't afford childcare. I like it there. Her voice was small but firm. I get to be near you. The words broke something in him that was already fractured. He pulled her close, kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled like the cheap shampoo they shared. Nothing fancy, but she was warm and alive in his. Every decision he'd made for the past 5 years had been about keeping her safe, keeping her fed, keeping her believing that the world could still be good even when everything else suggested otherwise. Okay, but if you get bored, if you want to go to Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, instead I won't get bored. I have my drawings. And sometimes that nice man Marcus, he tells me about the planes, about thrust and drag and how wings create lift. Daniel's jaw tightened. Marcus Webb, senior engineer at Vanguard Industries, old enough to be his father, limping from a helicopter crash that happened before Maya was born. Marcus, who looked at him sometimes with questions in his eyes, questions Daniel couldn't afford to answer. Just stay in your corner. Don't touch anything. Don't bother anyone. I never do, I know. I'm sorry, I know you never do. They left the apartment at 6:20, walked 3 blocks to the bus stop through streets still dark with pre-dawn gloom. Streetlights flickered. Businesses were shuttered behind metal grates. A homeless man slept in a doorway bundled in blankets that might have been blue once, but were now the color of urban grime. Daniel had $5 in his wallet and a choice to make the same choice he made every morning. Feed the homeless man or feed his daughter lunch if the school decided there was some administrative reason she couldn't get the free meal she was supposed to get. He kept walking, hated himself for it, but kept walking. The bus came at 6:32, 3 minutes late, which meant they'd arrive at Maya's school with barely enough time for her to get to class. She pressed against the window, watching the city wake up around them. Delivery trucks, early shift workers trudging towards subway entrances, a world that moved forward regardless of who was struggling to keep up. Daddy, yeah. When Mom was alive, did we have more money? The question came out of nowhere, sliced through him like shrapnel. We had enough, but we weren't poor. We had what we needed. That's not what I asked. He looked at her reflection in the window, her face overlaid with the passing city. Your mom worked, I worked. We had insurance and benefits and all the things that made life stable. Then she died and He stopped, reconsidered. Things changed. But we're okay. Are we? Yeah, sweetheart. We're okay. Another lie, but she accepted it the way she accepted all his lies, with the quiet knowledge that sometimes lies where the kindest thing a parent could offer. They got off at her school, a brick building that had seen better decades but still managed to produce kids who believed in futures. Maya shouldered her backpack, turned to him. I love you, Daddy. Love you too, sweetheart. More than all the stars. She smiled, the line he'd said every day since she was old enough to understand words. Then she walked toward the entrance, small and determined, and he watched until she disappeared inside. Watched because every time she walked away, he felt the irrational fear that she might not come back, that the universe would take her too, leave him with nothing but ghosts and regrets. He caught another bus heading east toward the industrial district where Vanguard Industries occupied a sprawling complex of hangars and office buildings. The sun was finally creeping over the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and gold that almost made the city look beautiful. Almost. His shift started at 7. He arrived at 6:53, used the service entrance that led to the locker room where maintenance staff changed into uniforms. His locker was number 47, combination 1832-6. Inside hung the blue uniform with cross embroidered on the pocket. He changed, left his street clothes folded on the narrow bench. The maintenance supervisor's office was empty. Daniel signed in on the clipboard, checked his assignment for the day. Hangar 3 executive corridor conference rooms. The high visibility areas where appearance mattered, where a single streak on a window or a scuff on marble could result in complaints from people who made in a day what he made in a month. He gathered his supplies: mop bucket, industrial cleaner, rags, spray bottles. The tools of invisibility, the equipment that allowed him to exist in spaces where he otherwise would never be permitted. He'd learned to move like a ghost, to be present without being seen, to understand that his value was measured entirely by his ability to erase evidence of his own existence. Hangar 3 was already alive with activity. Engineers clustered around workstations, studying schematics on tablets and arguing about specifications in language Daniel understood but pretended not to. The Apex prototype dominated the space, a sleek fighter jet that represented $400 million of aerospace engineering and the future of Vanguard's military contracts. It crouched on its test rig like a predator, all sharp angles and lethal grace. He'd seen jets like it before, flown jets like it in another life. He knew every system, every component, every weakness in designs that looked perfect on paper, but revealed themselves under stress. But that knowledge belonged to Captain Daniel Cross, and Captain Cross had died in Kandahar 6 years ago. What remained was just Daniel the janitor, the invisible man who pushed a mop and kept his head down. Hey, Cross, he turned. Marcus Webb approached, coffee in one hand, tablet in the other. The older man moved with the careful gait of someone whose body had been broken and repaired, but never quite worked the same afterward. He'd crashed a helicopter in '86, spent 2 years learning to walk again, came back to Vanguard because flying from a desk was better than not flying at all. Morning, Mr. Webb. Marcus. How many times do I have to tell you at work you're Mr. Webb? The engineer smiled, crow's feet deepening around eyes that saw too much. You're the only guy on the maintenance crew who uses titles. Everyone else calls me by my first name. Everyone else didn't serve. Marcus's smile faded slightly, replaced by that look, the one that said he suspected things he couldn't prove. You were military. Most janitors weren't. Daniel moved past him, headed for the executive corridor. I've got floors to clean. Your daughter coming this afternoon, if that's okay. It's fine. She's a good kid. Marcus paused. She asked smart questions. Really smart questions. About aerodynamics and engine configurations. Where'd she learn all that library books? Must be some library. Daniel kept walking. Marcus Webb was dangerous, not because he was cruel or vindictive, but because he was observant, because he remembered faces from military galas and declassified mission reports, because he looked at Daniel sometimes and saw past the uniform to the man underneath. The executive corridor gleamed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the runway. Offices lined both sides, each one belonging to someone who made decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Daniel started at the far end, mopping in slow, methodical strokes that he could maintain for hours. The motion was meditative, mindless, a way to make time pass without thinking about all the ways he'd failed to become the man he was supposed to be. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. He glanced up. Victoria Lang emerged from her office, moving with the clipped efficiency of someone who viewed every second as a resource to be maximized. She was 34, but carried herself like someone twice that age, with all sharp suits and sharper edges. Her father had built Vanguard from nothing, turned it into a defense contractor worth billions, before a heart attack took him 6 months ago. Now she ran the company, ran it with an iron fist and a chip on her shoulder the size of Sterling Lang's legacy. She walked past Daniel without acknowledgement. He was furniture to her part of the building's infrastructure, no more worthy of notice than the ventilation system or the fluorescent lights humming overhead. He'd learned to accept that. Some battles weren't worth fighting. The morning progressed in its usual rhythm. Clean the corridor, empty the trash bins, wipe down the conference room table. At 9, engineers filed in for a meeting about the Apex prototype. Daniel worked around them, invisible, erasing fingerprints from the glass walls, while they discussed test schedules and Pentagon requirements. He caught fragments of conversation. Pressure readings, fuel efficiency. The demonstration scheduled for Friday, 3 days away, when Victoria would prove to a room full of military brass and politicians that Vanguard deserved the contract that would make or break the company's future. The valve configuration looks good, one engineer said. We're running at optimal efficiency across all systems. Daniel's hands paused on the glass. Something about that statement felt wrong. He'd walked past the Apex prototype every morning for 2 months, had seen engineers installing components, running diagnostics. 2 weeks ago, he'd noticed something, a detail so small that he dismissed it as his mind playing tricks. But now, hearing them talk about optimal efficiency, that detail surfaced again. The second exhaust valve was reversed. He knew it the way he used to know when an aircraft was about to stall, when a patient was crashing, when a mission was going sideways. Instinct burned into neural pathways by 10,000 hours of training and experience. The valve was reversed, would read fine on the ground, but at altitude under stress, pressure would build in the combustion chamber until the whole system failed catastrophically. He finished wiping the glass, moved on. It wasn't his problem. He was a janitor. Janitors didn't offer unsolicited engineering advice to people who'd spent years studying aerospace design. Janitors kept their heads down, collected paychecks, went home to daughters who needed dinner and help with homework. But the knowledge sat in his chest like a stone, heavy and insistent. At noon, Maya arrived. The school had half days on Wednesdays for teacher planning, which meant Daniel had to bring her to work or leave her with Mrs. Rodriguez, who was kind but 73 and struggling with her own health. Maya settled into her usual corner, the small alcove near the hangar office where she could see the Apex prototype, but stay out of everyone's way. She pulled out her notebook, started drawing. Daniel brought her the lunch he'd packed, watched her eat the half sandwich, and pretend she was full. How was school? Good. We learned about Valley Forge, where Washington's army almost froze to death but didn't give up. Sounds familiar. She looked up at him, those knowing eyes. Are you okay, Daddy? You look worried. I'm fine. Just thinking about work stuff. What kind of work stuff? Nothing important. He ruffled her hair. Keep drawing. I'll be back to check on you in an hour. He returned to his rounds, but the worry about the valve gnawed at him. He walked past the Apex prototype, studied it from a distance. The exhaust system was partially visible enough that someone who knew what to look for could confirm the reversal. He needed a closer look, needed to be sure before he said anything that could cost him his job. Afternoon bled into evening. The engineers left. The hangar grew quiet. Daniel finished his checklist, signed out, collected Maya from her corner. She'd filled 3 pages with drawings, detailed sketches of the Apex from different angles. You're getting really good at these. I want to build planes someday, like the people who work here. You will. You're smart enough to do anything. They rode the bus home through a city turning dark. Maya pressed against his side, tired from a day of school and sitting quietly while adults ignored her. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, felt the fragile bones beneath her jacket. She was growing so fast, eating so little, stretching taller on a diet that barely met minimum nutritional requirements. Dinner was pasta with butter and a can of green beans. Maya ate without complaint. Daniel watched her guilt settling in his stomach the way it did every meal. He should have been able to provide more, should have figured out how to turn his skills into something that paid better than minimum wage, should have been anything other than what he was. After dinner, homework. He helped her with a reading assignment, listened to her explain the plot of a book about a girl learning to survive in the wilderness. Maya read aloud, stumbling over bigger words, but pushing through with determination that reminded him why he kept going when giving up would have been easier. Bedtime came at 8:30. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead. Daddy, yeah, that plane at your work, the big one. Is it safe? The question caught him off guard. Why do you ask? I don't know. She pulled the blankets tighter. Sometimes I worry about the people who will fly it. I hope they'll be okay. They'll be okay, sweetheart. The engineers are really smart. They know what they're doing. But what if they don't? He sat on the edge of her bed, brushed hair from her forehead. What's really worrying you? What if something happens to you? What if you get hurt at work or something else? What happens to me? The fear in her voice was raw, real. She'd lost her mother at 3 years old, too young to remember much, but old enough to understand abandonment. Now she lived with the constant terror that her father might disappear too, leave her alone in a world that had already proven itself cruel. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm careful. You can't promise that. No, but I can promise I'll do everything in my power to come home to you every single day. I can promise that you are the most important thing in my life, more important than anything else. I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, you will never be alone. She studied his face, searching for certainty in a universe that offered none. Okay. Okay, I believe you. He stayed until she fell asleep, watching her chest rise and fall in the steady rhythm of childhood dreams. Then he returned to the living room, sank onto the couch, let exhaustion claim him. But sleep wouldn't come. His mind kept circling back to the reversed valve, to the demonstration on Friday, to all the ways that small mistake could cascade into catastrophe. He'd seen it happen before, watched good people die because someone missed a detail, because systems that should have caught errors failed, because the universe didn't care about intentions, only consequences. At 2 in the morning, he made a decision. Thursday morning arrived the same as every other morning, except Daniel woke with purpose, sharpening his thoughts. He went through the routine. Breakfast, Maya to school bus to Vanguard, changing into his uniform. But today he brought something extra, the phone Elena had given him years ago. The one with a camera he never used because photographing anything felt like admitting he had a life worth documenting. The hangar was busy. Engineers swarmed the Apex prototype, running final checks before tomorrow's demonstration. Daniel mopped nearby, gradually working closer to the test rig. He needed photographic evidence of the reversed valve, something concrete, to show Victoria Lang when he tried to explain what her engineers had missed. But getting close enough without being noticed proved harder than expected. Security had increased. Pentagon representatives walked through, observing preparations. Everyone was on edge, aware that tomorrow would determine whether Vanguard secured the contract or lost everything. Cross, he turned. Marcus Webb stood 10 feet away, arms crossed. You've been circling the prototype for 20 minutes. Something wrong. Just doing my job. Your job is mopping floors, not studying classified military hardware. I'm not studying anything. I'm cleaning. Marcus stepped closer, lowered his voice. What are you looking for? Daniel met his eyes. The older man's expression held suspicion, but also concern, the look of someone who sensed danger but couldn't identify the source. Nothing. I'm looking for nothing. You're a terrible liar. Marcus glanced at the engineers, then back. Whatever you think you see, whatever you think you know, you need to let the experts handle it. Don't get yourself involved in something that'll cost you your job. What if the experts are wrong? Then that's not your problem. What if people die because I kept my mouth shut? The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Marcus's eyes narrowed. What did you notice the second exhaust valve? It's reversed. That's impossible. We check everything 3 times. Check it again. Marcus stared at him for a long moment. Who are you? I'm nobody. But I'm right about the valve. The engineer pulled out his tablet, accessed schematics. His fingers moved across the screen, pulling up installation records, diagnostic data. His face paled. Jesus Christ, you see it? The physical installation doesn't match the specs. Marcus looked up, shock and horror warring on his features. How did you know? Doesn't matter. What matters is fixing it before the demonstration. I need to tell Victoria. She won't listen to a janitor. Then I'll tell her I found it. Daniel shook his head. She'll want to know how you found it, what made you look. You tell her I noticed, you'll have to explain how a maintenance worker spotted something your entire engineering team missed. So what do you suggest I talk to her directly? Marcus laughed short and bitter. She'll have security throw you out. Maybe, but at least I'll have tried. You don't know her. Victoria Lang doesn't accept criticism well, especially not from people she considers beneath her notice. You walk into her office spouting warnings about reverse valves, she'll fire you on the spot for wasting her time. Then I'll be fired. But the valve will get fixed. What about your daughter? The question hit like a punch. Daniel thought about Maya in her corner, drawing her planes, dreaming her dreams. Thought about the apartment. They could barely afford the food that was never quite enough. The constant edge they walk between survival and disaster. My daughter needs a father who does the right thing, even when it costs him. Marcus studied him with new intensity. You were more than just military, weren't you? I was a lot of things. Now I'm a janitor trying to stop people from dying. Are you going to help me or not? The engineer was quiet for several seconds. Then I'll arrange a meeting with Victoria this afternoon, 3 o'clock. I'll tell her I need her to look at something urgent. And when she asks what I'll tell her about the valve, I'll say you brought it to my attention. He paused. But Daniel, you need to understand something. Victoria is under enormous pressure. The board is looking for any excuse to remove her. Her father's death left a power vacuum, and there are people circling, waiting for her to fail. If she perceives you as a threat, if she thinks you're trying to undermine her authority, I'm trying to save lives. She may not see it that way. Then that's on her. Marcus nodded slowly. 3 o'clock. Conference room B, don't be late. Daniel spent the rest of the morning completing his rounds while anxiety twisted in his gut. He checked on Maya during lunch, found her drawing a new sketch, this one showing the apex in flight with dark clouds behind it. That's good, sweetheart. Do you think it looks real? Very real. She showed him another page, a drawing of him mopping floors while the plane loomed in the background. The detail was remarkable, the perspective sophisticated for a 9-year-old. When did you draw this? Yesterday. I was watching you work. She pointed at the figure representing him. You look sad. I wasn't sad. Yes, you were. You get this look sometimes like you're remembering something that hurts. He had no response to that. Maya saw too much, understood too much. She'd spent her short life learning to read emotions because survival had depended on knowing when adults were lying, when situations were deteriorating, when she needed to stay quiet and invisible. I'm okay, he said finally. Just thinking about grown-up stuff. Will you tell me someday about the things that make you sad someday, when you're older? That's what you always say, because it's always true. She returned to her drawing. Daniel watched her for a moment longer, then went back to work. The hours crawled toward 3 o'clock. His palms sweated, his heart rate elevated. He hadn't been this nervous since the last time he'd flown into active combat, the mission that ended with hospital bombing and everything that came after. At 2:55, he made his way to conference room B. Marcus was already there, tablet in hand, expression grim. He nodded when Daniel entered. She's on her way. What did you tell her? That we have a critical safety issue with the apex, that it requires her immediate attention. Did you mention me? Not specifically, just that maintenance staff noticed something unusual. She's going to be pissed. Better pissed than presiding over a disaster. Footsteps approached, sharp heels striking marble with military precision. Victoria Lang swept into the conference room, Richard Kane trailing behind her. Vanguard's CFO was 53, perfectly groomed, with the smile of a man who'd learned early that charm could mask cruelty. This better be important, Marcus. Victoria's voice was ice. I have a call with Senator Morrison in 20 minutes. It's important. Marcus gestured toward Daniel. Mr. Cross noticed something during his cleaning rounds. Something we need to address before tomorrow's demonstration. Victoria's eyes landed on Daniel for the first time. Really? Her tone dripped skepticism. Our janitor noticed something, the second exhaust valve. Daniel's voice was steady despite his racing pulse. It's installed backwards. Impossible, Victoria looked at Richard. Tell him it's impossible. The CFO's smile widened. Our engineers check everything 3 times. We have protocols, quality control measures. The suggestion that a maintenance worker could spot an error that our entire team missed is, he paused, searching for the word, insulting. Check the valve, Daniel said. Physical installation versus the specs. You'll see I'm right. Victoria turned to Marcus. You dragged me away from critical calls for this. I verified his claim. The valve is reversed. That stopped her. The color drained from her face. You verified it. The installation records show it was mounted according to the original specs. But those specs were updated 2 weeks ago. The new configuration requires the valve to be flipped. Nobody updated the physical installation. How is that possible? Marcus hesitated. It's possible because we were rushing. Because you moved the demonstration up by 3 weeks to accommodate Senator Morrison's schedule. Because our team has been working 20-hour days trying to meet an impossible deadline. Don't blame me for your department's failures. I'm not blaming anyone. I'm telling you we have a problem. So fix it. We will. But we need to acknowledge where the error came from. Victoria's hands curled into fists. Her jaw tightened. Then her eyes found Daniel again, and something shifted in her expression. Rage, maybe? Or humiliation at being contradicted by someone she'd never noticed before. You. She pointed at him. How did you know I saw it during my rounds? You saw a reversed valve while mopping floors. Yes, she laughed sharp and cruel. And you're an expert on aerospace engineering. I know what I saw, what you saw. Richard Kane's step forward was classified military hardware that you have no business examining. What you did was likely violate multiple security protocols. I was doing my job. Your job is pushing a mop. Victoria moved closer. Your job is being invisible. Your job is staying in your lane and not pretending you understand things that are beyond your comprehension. The valve is backwards. According to you, according to the installation records. Marcus held up his tablet. According to objective data. Victoria snatched the tablet, studied the screen. Her face went through several expressions. Disbelief, anger, horror, resignation. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. Fix it. Tonight, I want the valve corrected and full diagnostics run by tomorrow morning. We'll need to push the demonstration back a few hours. No. Victoria, we need time to verify that everything else is correct. If we miss this, we might have missed other things. We didn't miss anything else. Fix the valve, run your diagnostics, but the demonstration stays on schedule. She handed back the tablet. I'm not giving Senator Morrison or the board any excuse to question our readiness. Ma'am, with all due respect, the demonstration stays on schedule. She turned to leave, then stopped. Looked back at Daniel with an expression he couldn't quite read. Something between curiosity and contempt. What's your name, Daniel Cross? How long have you worked here? 6 months. And in those 6 months, you've made it your business to study our aircraft. I noticed a problem. I reported it. You noticed something that our engineers people with decades of experience and multiple advanced degrees somehow missed. Yes, lucky guess if you want to call it that. Her eyes narrowed. Or unlucky for you because now I know your face. Now I know that you're someone who can't follow simple instructions about staying in their lane. She stepped closer. Do you know what happens to people who make me look bad in front of my CFO? The valve is backwards. That's not about you looking bad. That's about physics. Everything is about me looking bad, she snapped. Everything is about whether I'm strong enough to run this company, whether I'm capable of filling my father's shoes, whether I deserve to be here. And you, some nobody who pushes a mop, you just walked into my meeting and made me look incompetent. I saved your demonstration. You embarrassed me. Richard Kane put a hand on her shoulder. Victoria, perhaps we should discuss this privately. She shrugged him off. No, I want him to hear this. I want everyone to hear this. She raised her voice, projecting. This man, this janitor, thinks he's special because he noticed something, thinks that makes him valuable, thinks that entitles him to respect. Daniel said nothing. There was nothing to say that would change her mind. Let me explain something about how the world works. Victoria's voice was cold. There are people who matter and people who don't. People who build things and people who clean up after them. You're in the second category. You exist to make my life easier, not to question my decisions or correct my mistakes. I'm trying to prevent deaths. You're trying to feel important. She leaned in close. But you're not important. You're replaceable. There are 1,000 men just like you who'd take your job tomorrow if you disappeared. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to mopping floors. You're going to forget this meeting happened. And if I ever catch you stepping out of line again, if I ever hear that you've been studying our aircraft or offering unsolicited opinions about engineering decisions, I will personally ensure that you never work in this industry again. The threat landed with the weight of certainty. Daniel's hands tightened into fists at his sides. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to accept that some battles couldn't be won, that protecting Maya meant swallowing his pride and keeping his head down. But then he thought about the pilots who'd fly the Apex. Young men and women who'd trust their lives to systems they assumed had been checked properly, who'd climb into that cockpit believing that someone cared whether they came home alive. "The valve is backwards," he said quietly. "Fix it or don't. But if that jet explodes, if people die because you were too proud to listen, that's on you." Victoria's face went white. "Get out." "Ma'am, get out of my building." Marcus stepped forward. "Victoria, wait." He didn't mean. "Yes, he did," she pointed at Daniel. "Security, now." Two guards appeared at the door, summoned by her tone. They moved toward Daniel, professional but firm. "This isn't necessary." Marcus positioned himself between them. "He reported a safety issue, that's all. You can't fire him for that. Watch me." The guards took Daniel's arms. He didn't resist. What was the point? He'd done what he came to do, delivered the warning, forced the issue. Whether Victoria chose to listen was beyond his control now. They escorted him out of the conference room, through the executive corridor, past his mop and bucket, still sitting where he'd left them 3 hours ago. Past the Apex prototype, gleaming and lethal and flawed. Past his locker where his street clothes waited. They took him all the way to the parking lot, released him outside the gates. "Don't come back." Daniel stood in the fading afternoon light, watching Vanguard Industries through chain-link fence. He'd just lost his job, lost the steady paycheck that kept them housed and fed, lost the health insurance he couldn't afford to replace, lost everything because he couldn't keep his mouth shut and his head down. He pulled out his phone, called the school. "Roosevelt Elementary. How may I help you?" "This is Daniel Cross, my daughter Maya Cross. She's in the after-school program. I need to pick her up early. Is everything okay, Mr. Cross? Family emergency? I'll be there in 30 minutes. The woman on the phone picked up on something in his voice. "Okay, I'll let her teacher know." He walked to the bus stop, waited 15 minutes in the cold. The bus came, took him across the city to Maya's school. She was waiting in the front office, backpack clutched in front of her like a shield. "Daddy." Her voice was small. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Let's go home." "But your work." "I left early today. Come on." They rode the bus in silence. Maya knew better than to push when he had that expression, the one that said he was barely holding himself together. She pressed against his side, offering comfort she was too young to be providing. The apartment felt colder than usual. Daniel turned up the heat, knowing he couldn't afford the higher electric bill, but unable to let his daughter shiver. He made dinner pasta again, with sauce this time, because he needed to use up the jar before it went bad. Maya ate quietly. Then, "Did you get fired?" He looked up, surprised. "What makes you think that? Because you came to get me early. Because you won't look at me. Because you have that face you had when we lived in Baltimore and you lost your job at the warehouse. I'm not fired. Not exactly. What does not exactly mean? It means I had a disagreement with my boss. It means I might need to find different work. But you said we weren't moving. You promised. We're not moving." Daniel reached across the table. "I'll find something else. Something better, maybe." "There isn't anything better. Not for us." The naked honesty in her voice cut deep. She was right, of course. Jobs that paid minimum wage were interchangeable menial labor that required warm bodies and nothing more. But jobs that came with insurance, with stability, with the possibility of advancement. Those required credentials. He didn't have references. He couldn't give a work history that had a 6-year gap filled with explanations he refused to provide. "I'll figure it out." "You always say that, because it's always true. I've always figured it out." She looked at him with those old eyes. "When do we stop figuring it out and start living?" The question hung in the air, unanswerable. He had no idea when survival would transition into something that resembled life. Maybe never. Maybe this was life now, this constant scramble, this endless fear that one wrong move would send them spiraling into the abyss. After dinner, Maya went to her room without being asked. Daniel sat on the couch, stared at the wall, tried to figure out what came next. He had $300 in the bank. Rent was due in 2 weeks, $950 he didn't have. Food was running low. Maya needed new shoes. The universe demanded more than he could provide, and he was so tired of pretending he had answers. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Daniel Cross. Who's this Marcus Webb? I got your number from your personnel file. Don't worry, I'm calling on my personal phone. I can't come back to work. She made that clear. I'm not calling about work. Marcus paused. I'm calling because I know who you are. Daniel's blood went cold. You don't know anything. Captain Daniel Cross, 82nd Medical Battalion, flight surgeon, combat pilot, Silver Star recipient. I spent the evening pulling military records, cross-referencing faces from old photographs. You're him, the pilot who saved Sterling Lang's life in Nevada. The words hung between them undeniable. I'm nobody. You're the man who flew through a sandstorm that killed 6 other aircraft. You're the man who pulled Sterling from burning wreckage and performed emergency first aid while the fuel tank was cooking off. You're the man who refused every award, every promotion, every opportunity Sterling tried to give you afterward. That was a long time ago. 15 years. Marcus's voice was gentle. What happened, Daniel? How does a decorated war hero end up mopping floors? I got blown up. My wife died. I have a daughter to raise. That's what happened. There's more to it than that. Daniel closed his eyes. The memories came flooding back, the ones he'd spent 6 years trying to drown. The hospital in Kandahar, the explosion, the heat and screaming. The moment he'd thrown himself over 3 wounded soldiers, felt shrapnel tear through his arms, known with absolute certainty that everything he was would be lost. My hands don't work right anymore. Nerve damage from the bombing. I can hold a mop. I can't hold a scalpel. I can't grip a flight stick at high Gs. So I'm nobody now, just a guy trying to feed his kid. You're wrong about the valve. Daniel's eyes snapped open. What you're wrong, it's not just backwards. There are 3 other errors in the Apex systems. Things we would never have found if you hadn't forced us to look. The entire aircraft would have exploded during the demonstration. So fix them. We are. Victoria authorized overtime round-the-clock diagnostics. But she's furious. She wants to fire you, officially put it in writing so you can't claim unemployment. Let her. Daniel, you saved dozens of lives today. Pilots, ground crew, probably civilians if the explosion had been big enough. You did that while knowing it would cost you everything. I did what anyone would do. No, most people would have kept quiet. Most people would have protected themselves. Then most people are smarter than me. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Victoria found the photograph, the one Sterling kept in his office. You and him in Nevada. She knows you saved her father's life. Good for her. She's looking for you, trying to figure out how to make this right. There's nothing to make right. I warned her about the valve. She fixed it. End of story. Daniel, she owes you. Sterling owed you. This company owes you more than a janitor's paycheck and a pink slip. I don't want anything from her. What about your daughter? That stopped him. Maya's face flashed in his mind, her drawings, her dreams, her quiet acceptance of a life that kept getting harder. What about her? She deserves better than this. Better than moving every 6 months. Better than a father who's too proud to accept help. I'm not proud. I'm realistic. People like Victoria Lang don't help people like me. They use us until we're not useful anymore, then they discard us. She's not her father, but she's trying to be. Marcus's voice softened, and right now she's terrified. Terrified of failing. Terrified of dishonoring Sterling's memory. Terrified that everyone was right when they said she wasn't ready to run Vanguard. That's not my problem. Maybe not, but you know what it's like to be terrified. You know what it's like to feel like you've lost everything that made you who you were. Maybe that's why you should give her a chance. Daniel had no response. He sat in his dark apartment, phone pressed to his ear, thinking about all the chances people had given him over the years. The chances he'd squandered or rejected because accepting help felt like admitting defeat. I have to go. The demonstration is tomorrow at 2. Victoria wants you there. I'm not invited. You're invited. Marcus paused. Please come. Not for her. For the pilots who will fly that jet someday. They deserve to know that someone cares whether they come home. The line went dead. Daniel set down the phone, stared at the ceiling, wondered how his life had become a series of impossible choices between bad options and worse ones. Maya appeared in the doorway, silhouette against hallway light. I heard you talking. Are you okay? Yeah, sweetheart, just grown-up stuff. She crossed to the couch, climbed up beside him. Put your arm around her shoulders the way he used to when she was smaller and the world made more sense. Daddy, that lady at your work, the mean one. Why was she so angry at you? Because I told her something she didn't want to hear. But you were right, doesn't matter. Being right isn't the same as being listened to. That's stupid. Yeah, it is. They sat together in comfortable silence. Outside, the city hummed its endless song of sirens and traffic and lives being lived by people who had their acts together better than he did. Daddy, do you ever wish you were still a pilot? The question pierced him. Every day, every single day, sometimes. Why don't you fly anymore? You know why, my hands. But you said they work well enough for most things. Flying isn't most things. Flying is precision. One mistake and people die. So you just gave up? I didn't give up. I adapted. I found new ways to be useful. By mopping floors. Her tone wasn't cruel, just honest. Painfully honest. By keeping us fed. By giving you a place to sleep. By being here when you need me. I always need you, and I'm always here. That's what matters. She rested her head against his chest. I'm sorry the lady was mean to you. You didn't deserve that. People are mean sometimes, especially when they're scared. What was she scared of? Being wrong, being weak, being less than what everyone expects. Maya was quiet for a moment. That sounds hard. It is. Do you think she'll apologize? Daniel thought about Victoria Lang, her ice queen demeanor, her father's massive shadow, the board members circling like sharks, the weight of expectations crushing her spine. No, sweetheart, I don't think she'll apologize. That's sad. Yeah, it is. They stayed like that until Maya fell asleep against him, small and warm and trusting, despite every reason not to be. He carried her to bed, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, stood in her doorway, watching her breathe this miracle he somehow hadn't destroyed yet. Then he returned to the couch, pulled out his phone, looked up bus schedules to Vanguard Industries. The demonstration was tomorrow at 2. Marcus had invited him. Victoria hadn't rescinded it. He had every reason not to go, no job, to return to no guarantee he wouldn't be escorted out again, no logical benefit to showing his face. But those pilots deserved to know someone had checked the valve. Someone had fought to make sure the systems were sound. Someone gave a damn whether they lived or died. He set an alarm for 5 in the morning, closed his eyes, tried to sleep. Tomorrow he'd go back to Vanguard. Not because Victoria Lang wanted him there, not because Marcus had invited him, but because doing the right thing was the only way he knew how to live with himself, even when the right thing cost him everything. The night pressed down heavy with consequences he couldn't predict. His hands trembled, slightly nerve damage, reminding him of all the ways he'd been broken. But broken didn't mean useless. Broken didn't mean finished. Tomorrow he'd prove that. Tomorrow he'd walk back through those gates, head held high, and remind everyone who'd forgotten that invisible people were only invisible if you chose not to see them. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. Friday morning arrived with fog thick enough to taste. Daniel woke before dawn, dressed in the same clothes he'd worn to Vanguard for 6 months, minus the uniform he'd never see again. The blue button-down shirt Elena had bought him years ago, still holding its shape despite countless washings. Jeans without holes. The good shoes he saved for job interviews that never materialized into anything better. Maya found him in the kitchen at 5:30, confusion creasing her forehead. You're not working today. I'm going to watch the demonstration. But you got fired. Not officially. Not yet. She absorbed this with the quiet calculation of a child who'd learned to measure risk by reading adult faces. Will they let you in? I don't know. What if they don't? Then I tried. He made her breakfast, packed her lunch, walked her to the bus stop through streets slick with moisture that hadn't decided whether to become rain. The city felt heavier, somehow compressed beneath low clouds that turned everything gray and indistinct. At the school entrance, Maya grabbed his hand harder than usual. Come back, okay? Always do. Promise. He thought about the promise he'd made in Kandahar to soldiers who didn't make it home, about Elena's hand slipping from his in a hospital bed, about all the ways the universe made liars of people who promised certainty. I'll do everything I can. She accepted this non-answer the way she accepted everything else, kissed his cheek, walked through doors that would keep her safe for the next 7 hours. He watched until she disappeared, then caught the eastbound bus toward whatever consequences awaited. Vanguard's parking lot already held 24 vehicles by 7 o'clock. News vans clustered near the main gate, satellite dishes pointed skyward. Journalists tested microphones, checked lighting, prepared to document either triumph or disaster, depending on how the next few hours unfolded. Daniel approached the security checkpoint, showed his ID. The guard studied it, frowned. "You're not on the access list for today." "I was invited." "By who?" "Marcus Webb, engineering department." The guard made a call, spoke quietly into his radio. Waited. Daniel stood in the November cold, watching his breath materialize and vanish, wondering if this whole trip had been a mistake. The guard hung up. "Mr. Webb confirms. But you're restricted to public viewing areas only. No access to restricted zones, hangar floors, or testing facilities." "Understood." The gate opened. Daniel walked through, felt eyes tracking him from the news crews. Nobody recognized him yet, just another early arrival in civilian clothes. He kept his head down, moved toward the main building where public observation galleries overlooked the testing hangar. Inside the facility hummed with controlled chaos. Pentagon officials in dress uniforms clustered near coffee stations. Defense contractors worked phones, finalizing contracts contingent on successful demonstration. Senator Morrison held court with local politicians, everyone jockeying for position in case today's events produced either glory or scandal worth associating with. Daniel found the observation gallery on the 3rd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked down on the hangar, where the Apex prototype sat on its test rig, sleek and deadly in the industrial lighting. Engineers swarmed the aircraft, running final diagnostics, checking systems that had been triple verified overnight after Daniel's warning forced the valve correction. He took a seat in the back row, tried to become invisible again. Old habits. Cross. Marcus Webb materialized beside him, coffee in both hands. He offered one to Daniel. "Thought you could use this." "Thanks, you came." "Said I would." Marcus studied him with that penetrating gaze that saw too much. "Victoria knows you're here. I told her this morning. And she didn't object. Didn't invite you either, but didn't object." "Progress. Maybe." Marcus sipped his coffee. "The valve is fixed. All 4 errors we found are corrected. The Apex is as safe as we can make it." "You sound uncertain." "I'm always uncertain. That's what keeps aircraft from falling out of the sky." They sat in silence, watching engineers complete their preparations. The hangar slowly filled with guest observers, anyone who'd been deemed important enough to witness Vanguard's future being decided in real time. Daniel spotted Victoria on the hangar floor, moving between Pentagon representatives with the controlled grace of someone who'd been performing all her life. She wore navy instead of her usual black hair, pulled back severely every inch the CEO who belonged in her father's office. But he caught the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands curled into fists when she thought nobody was watching. "She's drowning," Marcus said quietly. "Not my problem. The board met yesterday. Emergency session. Richard Kane proposed a vote of no confidence." Daniel looked at him sharply. "On what grounds?" "Questionable judgment. Specifically her handling of the valve situation." He twisted it, made it sound like she ignored safety protocols, relied on unqualified personnel for technical assessments. "I'm the unqualified personnel. You're the excuse he needed." Marcus's jaw tightened. Richard's been positioning himself to take over since Sterling died. He sees Victoria as a placeholder, someone to weather the initial grief period before the adults take control. The adults being him. The adults being a board majority he's been cultivating for months. Daniel watched Victoria shake hands with a general smile, professionally pretend everything was fine. Politics. Corporate warfare dressed in suits and handshakes. He'd left the military partly to escape, that only to discover the civilian world ran on the same power dynamics, just with different uniforms. What does he gain if she fails control of Vanguard? A seat at the table for defense contracts worth billions. Richard's not stupid. He's patient. He'll let Victoria take the fall for anything that goes wrong, position himself as the stabilizing force the company needs. And if the demonstration succeeds, then she survives another quarter. Maybe 2. But Richard will find another opening. He always does. Sounds exhausting. That's leadership. Marcus finished his coffee. The constant knowledge that people want what you have, will take it if you show weakness, will smile while they sharpen knives for your back. "Glad I'm just a janitor." "You're not just anything. That's the problem." Movement below drew their attention. Victoria climbed the stairs to the observation gallery, Richard Kane following 2 steps behind, like a shadow that had learned to walk. She scanned the crowd, found Daniel in the back row. Their eyes met. Something complicated passed between them, too many emotions to parse cleanly. She approached Richard, trailing. Daniel stood more reflex than conscious choice. Mr. Cross, her voice was neutral professional. I'm surprised you came. Mr. Webb invited me, did he? Not a question. She glanced at Marcus, then back to Daniel. I wasn't aware terminated employees received invitations to classified demonstrations. I'm not terminated, not officially. A technicality we can remedy. Richard's smile was all teeth. Miss Lang, perhaps we should have security escort number. Victoria cut him off. Mr. Cross saved this company from catastrophic failure. The least we can do is let him watch the results. How generous. Richard's tone suggested anything but. Though I wonder about the optics of having someone with his limited credentials present for such a sensitive event. His credentials saved lives. What have yours done lately? The words landed like a slap. Richard's smile froze. Several nearby observers turned suddenly interested in the conversation. Victoria, Richard's voice dropped to a warning. We discussed this. We discussed nothing. You propose firing him to save face. I declined. Because you're emotionally compromised. Richard stepped closer, lowered his voice further, but not enough. Because he reminds you of your father, of some debt you think you owe. But sentiment doesn't run companies. Hard decisions do. Then it's fortunate I'm the one making them. For now. The threat hung in the air, naked and undeniable. Victoria's face went white. Daniel watched the interaction, recognized the dynamic. Richard wasn't just her CFO. He was the voice of board members who wanted her gone, the manifestation of every doubt she had about her own capability. I think we're done here. Victoria's voice was ice. Return to your seat, Richard. The demonstration begins in 30 minutes. We're not finished discussing this. Yes, we are. Richard held her gaze for a long moment, then turned and walked away. But his smile remained sharp and knowing. He'd made his point, planted seeds of doubt in front of observers who'd carry those seeds back to the boardroom. Victoria watched him go, then turned to Daniel. I owe you an apology. You don't owe me anything. I threw a mop at you, publicly humiliated you in front of your coworkers, called you nothing. You were under pressure. That's not an excuse. She looked at him. Really looked at him for the first time. I found the photograph, you and my father in Nevada. Marcus confirmed you're the pilot who saved his life. That was a long time ago, not to me. Her voice cracked slightly. He talked about you sometimes. Never named you, but he'd tell the story. The pilot who flew through impossible conditions, who refused every reward, who just wanted to go home. She paused. I never imagined that pilot would end up mopping my floors. Life takes strange turns. Why didn't you tell me when I was tearing you apart, when I was treating you like you were worthless? Why didn't you tell me you saved my father? Because what I did for your father has nothing to do with who I am now. I'm not that pilot anymore. I'm just a man trying to raise his daughter. You're more than that. No. Daniel held her gaze. I'm exactly that. And it's enough. Announcement echoed through the facility. Guests were requested to take their seats. The demonstration would commence in 15 minutes. Victoria didn't move. I want to offer you your job back with a promotion, engineering consultant or safety specialist. Something that uses your actual skills instead of wasting them on manual labor. I don't want a job I didn't earn. You earned it by saving this demonstration. I noticed a valve, that's all. You noticed what a team of experienced engineers missed. That's not nothing. Daniel thought about Maya, about the rent due in 2 weeks, about all the practical reasons to accept what Victoria offered. Then he thought about Richard Kane's smile, about corporate politics he wanted no part of, about the cost of becoming visible in a world that had learned to ignore him. Let me think about it. The demonstration. After, let's see if the apex actually works first, she nodded. Started to walk away, then turned back. Thank you. For the valve. For coming today. For, she searched for words. For not giving up on us even when we gave up on you. I didn't do it for you, I know. That's what makes it matter. She descended the stairs. Daniel watched her go, this woman drowning in her father's legacy, fighting battles on fronts she couldn't even see. Marcus settled back into the seat beside him. That was interesting. That was complicated. Same thing. Marcus pulled up his tablet, checked system readouts being transmitted from the Apex. All diagnostics green, fuel pressure optimal, engine temperature normal. Everything looks perfect. Why do you sound worried? Because perfect, it makes me nervous. Perfect means we're not looking hard enough. The hangar lights dimmed. Spotlights illuminated the Apex prototype, gleaming white and blue Vanguard's logo prominent on the vertical stabilizer. Guests filled observation galleries on 3 levels. Cameras focused. Senator Morrison took a front row seat flanked by Pentagon brass, whose expressions suggested they'd seen too many demonstrations that promised revolution and delivered disappointment. Victoria stood at a podium microphone amplifying her voice through the facility. Distinguished guests, members of the press, representatives of the United States Armed Forces. Today we demonstrate the future of American air superiority. The Apex prototype represents 5 years of development, countless hours of testing, and the dedication of the finest aerospace engineers in the world. She continued hitting talking points about thrust-to-weight ratios and stealth capabilities and weapons integration. Daniel tuned out the technical specifications he already knew watched. Instead, the engineers clustered around control stations. They'd worked all night fixing errors they'd missed, rechecking systems they'd assumed were correct. Exhaustion showed in every face the bone-deep weariness of people who'd pushed past human limits because failure meant consequences they couldn't afford. The test will proceed in 3 phases. Victoria's voice pulled him back. Phase 1, ground-based engine testing at full power. Phase 2, simulated flight conditions, including high-G maneuvers and weapons deployment scenarios. Phase 3, extended duration burn to verify system endurance. All phases would be conducted on the test rig the Apex secured to massive restraints that would channel thrust into measurement systems instead of letting the aircraft actually fly. Safer this way, more controlled, but also less impressive, which meant Pentagon observers would be judging based on data rather than visceral demonstrations of power. Initiating test sequence. The Apex's engines ignited a roar that rattled windows and compressed air into something almost solid. The sound bypassed thought, spoke directly to primitive brain regions that recognize predators and power. Daniel felt it in his chest, that familiar vibration he'd missed for 6 years, the mechanical thunder of controlled explosions producing thrust sufficient to defy gravity. Phase 1 proceeded perfectly. Engine output exceeded projections. Fuel efficiency hit target parameters. Heat management systems kept temperatures well below redline. Engineers exchanged relieved glances. Victoria allowed herself a small smile. Even Senator Morrison nodded approvingly. Transitioning to Phase 2, the test rig tilted, simulating pitch and roll angles. The Apex's engines throttled up and down, mimicking combat maneuvers. Simulated weapons loads deployed from internal bays. Every system responded exactly as designed. Daniel watched the pressure readings on Marcus's tablet, track numbers that told stories the uninitiated couldn't read. Combustion chamber temperature steady, fuel flow consistent, no pressure spikes, no anomalies, nothing that suggested problems lurking beneath the surface. Phase 2 complete. All systems nominal. Proceeding to Phase 3. The engine settled into a sustained burn, the kind of output that would carry the Apex across continents at supersonic speeds. Endurance testing, not exciting, just necessary. Proof that the aircraft could maintain performance over extended operations. 90 seconds passed, then 120. Guests started checking phones, bored by success that didn't include explosions or failure. The test was working exactly as planned, which meant it was also deeply uninteresting to watch. Daniel's eyes found Victoria on the hangar floor. She'd relaxed slightly, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. This was it. Successful demonstration. Pentagon-satisfied board members silenced Richard Kane's vote of no confidence, derailed before it could gain momentum. Then Maya appeared. Daniel saw her before anyone else noticed, a small figure slipping through a service door at the far end of the hangar. She moved along the wall, trying to stay hidden, clutching her notebook against her chest. Looking for him, probably having convinced Mrs. Rodriguez or some other adult that her father needed her for some invented emergency. Terror flooded his system, cold and absolute. She wasn't supposed to be here. The school wasn't supposed to release her. Someone had screwed up, let a 9-year-old child wander into a restricted military demonstration where classified hardware was being tested at outputs that could incinerate flesh if safety protocols failed. He stood startled toward the stairs. Marcus caught his arm. "What's wrong?" "My daughter. She's in the hangar." Marcus followed his gaze, saw Maya picking her way through equipment cases toward the observation windows. "How did she get past security?" "Doesn't matter. I need to get her out." Daniel descended the stairs 3 at a time, pushed through doors into the hangar. The engine noise was deafening here, unfiltered by observation glass. Maya saw him coming, smiled, started to wave. The alarm sounded, a single tone, sharp and insistent. Engineers scrambled to control stations. The Apex's engine note changed, rougher, somehow unstable. Warning lights flashed across multiple screens. Pressure spike in secondary fuel line. An engineer's voice cut through noise and confusion. Feedback loop forming in combustion chamber. "Impossible. Someone else. We corrected the valve. Not the valve. Something else." Daniel ran toward Maya, but she'd frozen in place, terrified by alarms and shouting adults. He was still 20 feet away when the first fuel line ruptured, spraying pressurized liquid across the test rig. Ignition was instantaneous, inevitable. Fire bloomed hungry and fast. "Emergency shutdown," Victoria's voice strident with panic. "Kill the engines now. Overrides not responding." Manual cut off, valves jammed. Daniel reached Maya, swept her into his arms. She buried her face against his chest, small body trembling. Around them, engineers fought to contain a disaster unfolding in real time. The fire spread, consuming fuel, oxygen, anything combustible. Heat radiated in waves that pushed against exposed skin. Everyone out. Victoria was suddenly beside them, her professional composure shattered. "Clear the hangar now." The explosion came without warning. A secondary fuel cell, stressed beyond tolerance, detonated with force that blew out windows and knocked people off their feet. Daniel hit the ground. Maya still clutched against him, felt the percussion wave compress his lungs. Smoke filled everything, thick and black. The fire suppression system activated, foam raining from ceiling nozzles. But the fire had spread beyond what automated systems could handle, fed by fuel lines that should have been secured but weren't, containment protocols that someone had bypassed or ignored. Daniel rolled to his feet, Maya's weight insignificant against adrenaline-fueled strength. He could see an exit 30 feet through smoke and flame. Could make it if he moved fast, if luck held, if the universe decided not to take everything from him today. Victoria stumbled past, coughing, blood running from a cut on her forehead. She went down, disoriented by smoke and concussion. "Help her." The words came from somewhere deeper than thought. "Maya, close your eyes." "Why?" "Just do it, sweetheart." He set Maya down, shielded her behind an equipment case. "Stay here, don't move." "Daddy." "Don't move." He ran back into the fire, found Victoria trying to stand on legs that wouldn't support her weight. He grabbed her arm, hauled her upright. "Can you walk?" "I think so." "Then walk." They stumbled toward the exit together, Victoria leaning heavily on him. The fire had grown, spread to storage areas where materials waited that shouldn't be near open flame. Another explosion somewhere behind them, smaller but still terrifying. The building was coming apart. Maya was where he'd left her, eyes squeezed shut, notebook still clutched like a talisman. He lifted her again, one arm around Victoria, moving towards safety through a world that had become nothing but heat and smoke and dying. The exit was blocked. Burning debris had collapsed across the doorway, flames too intense to push through. Daniel reversed course, sought alternate routes, found them all compromised. They were trapped. This way. Marcus appeared from the smoke, fire extinguisher in hand. He sprayed foam, cleared a narrow path. "Follow me." They stumbled after him, 4 people who shouldn't have been here, racing against fire that wanted nothing more than to consume them all. Marcus led them through a maintenance corridor, through doors that emergency protocols had left unsealed, finally into open air, where other survivors gathered, coughing and bleeding and alive. Paramedics swarmed immediately. Someone tried to take Maya from Daniel's arms. He wouldn't let go. "Sir, we need to check her for injuries. She's fine." "I've got her." "Sir, I've got her." Victoria collapsed onto a stretcher. "Let EMTs treat the gash on her forehead." Marcus leaned against a wall chest, heaving, soot-blackened and exhausted. Around them, firefighters battled the blaze, consuming Hangar 3, poured water and foam into an inferno. that had already destroyed the Apex prototype and everything it represented. Cameras captured it all. News crews filmed the burning building, the injured employees, the gathered crowds of observers who'd expected triumph and witnessed disaster. One camera focused on Daniel still holding Maya blood on his shirt from Victoria's head wound. The lens zoomed in, caught details the operator probably didn't understand the significance of yet. Daniel felt it happening, the exposure he'd avoided for 6 years. The moment when invisible became visible, when anonymous became identified. He should have left, found somewhere to hide before someone started asking questions about who he was and why he'd been in the hangar during a classified demonstration. But Maya was shaking against him, traumatized by noise and fire, and coming far too close to death. So he stayed, held her murmured reassurances that the danger had passed, even though danger never really passed, just changed forms. "Mr. Cross," a reporter approached, microphone extended. "Can you tell us what happened in there?" No comment. "Were you an employee?" "A guest. We're trying to understand." No comment. The camera stayed on him, relentless. Daniel turned away, presented his back to the lens. But he'd been filmed already. His face captured, his presence documented. Someone would recognize him eventually. Someone always did. Victoria appeared beside him, bandage on her forehead, blanket around her shoulders. She looked at Maya, at Daniel, at the burning hangar behind them. "You saved my life. I saved my daughter. You were just in the way." She almost smiled. "Still, thank you." "What happened? What went wrong?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Her voice hardened. Someone bypassed safety protocols. Someone sabotaged the demonstration. Richard? Maybe. Probably. Victoria watched firefighters battle flames that refused to die. He wanted me to fail. Needed me to fail. And now he's got everything he needs to take the company. So fight back with what the Apex is destroyed. The demonstration failed. Pentagon observers just watched $400 million burn while my employees ran for their lives. She turned to him. "I'm finished, Daniel. The board will remove me by Monday, then make them remove you fighting. I'm too tired to fight. You're Sterling Lang's daughter. You don't get to be tired." The words landed harder than he'd intended. Victoria flinched, then straightened. Around them, the fire began to die, smothered by foam and water, and the simple exhaustion of having nothing left to burn. "I need to make a statement." Victoria looked at the gathered press. "They'll want answers I don't have. They'll want explanations for how this happened, who's responsible, what comes next. Tell them the truth. The truth is that I failed. The truth is that someone sabotaged your demonstration. That's not failure, that's crime. Can you prove it?" "Not yet, but Marcus can. Give him access, resources, authority to investigate without interference. And if he finds that Richard was involved, then you destroy him." Victoria studied Daniel for a long moment. "Why are you helping me?" "I'm not helping you. I'm helping the people who'll work here after you're gone, who deserve to know their employer won't tolerate sabotage and attempted murder." She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll give Marcus whatever he needs. And one more thing." Daniel adjusted Maya in his arms, felt her breath against his neck. "Fire me officially. Put it in writing. I don't want your job back. I don't want your debt. I want separation from this mess before it consumes everything." "You're sure? Positive?" "All right," Victoria extended her hand. "For what it's worth, you're the best janitor I ever had." He shook her hand, felt calluses that matched his own. "I'm the only janitor you ever noticed." "Fair point." She walked toward the cameras, toward questions she had no good answers for, toward a future that looked increasingly uncertain. Daniel watched her go, this woman who'd humiliated him and then depended on him, who'd been cruel and vulnerable in equal measure. "Daddy." Maya's voice was small. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come." "Why did you—" "I wanted to see you. I was worried something bad would happen, and I wouldn't get to say goodbye." "Nothing bad happened to me. The building caught on fire. But I'm okay. We're okay." She pulled back enough to look at him, eyes wet with tears and soot. "Are we really okay? Or are you lying again?" Daniel thought about the job he'd just refused, about rent due in 2 weeks, about the certainty that returning to invisible anonymity was no longer possible after today. Thought about all the ways their lives were about to change, for better or worse, he couldn't predict. "We're really okay," he said, because the lie was kinder than the truth, and kindness was the only thing he had left to give. The viral video hit 40 million views before Daniel and Maya made it home. Someone had captured the whole sequence, Daniel running through fire, emerging with his daughter, and Victoria, the soot-stained uniform sleeve riding up to reveal the tattoo. The 82nd Medical Battalion insignia clear as day in high-definition footage that news networks played on loop, while anchors speculated about the mysterious hero, Janitor. Daniel's phone started ringing at 8 that evening. Unknown numbers one after another. He stopped answering after the fifth reporter asked for exclusive interviews, stopped checking voicemail after a Pentagon spokesperson left a message requesting he contact them regarding classified service records. Maya ate cereal for dinner because Daniel couldn't focus enough to cook. She didn't complain, just watched him pace their small apartment while his phone buzzed itself to death on the kitchen counter. They know who you are now. Yeah, is that bad? I don't know yet. The knock came at 9:30. Daniel checked the peephole, found Marcus Webb standing in the dingy hallway looking uncomfortable, in a building that hadn't seen maintenance since the 80s. He opened the door. Marcus held up a bag from the Chinese place 2 blocks over. Figured you might not have eaten. Daniel let him in. Marcus glanced around the apartment, taking in the sagging couch, the kitchen table with one wobbly leg, the whole depressing reality of how the man who'd saved his CEO's life actually lived. Maya appeared from her bedroom cautious. She recognized Marcus from the hangar, relaxed slightly. You're the man who talks about thrust ratios? Guilty. Marcus smiled. You're the artist, the one who draws better than most of our engineering students. Daddy says I can go to college someday if I keep practicing. Your daddy's right. Marcus set the food on the table. You should eat something. Long day. She took a container, disappeared back to her room. Daniel waited until her door clicked shut. How bad? Marcus pulled out his tablet, showed Daniel the video. The view count, the trending hashtags, the news articles already being written. Pentagon confirms decorated war hero, working as janitor. Victoria Lang's life saved by father's former rescuer. Mystery deepens around Captain Daniel Cross. They're digging into your service record, Marcus said. The classified parts are still sealed, but they've got enough to construct a narrative. Silver Star recipient, combat surgeon, the Kandahar hospital bombing, your wife's death. He paused. They've got everything except why you disappeared. Let them wonder. They won't stop wondering. This is the kind of story that feeds itself. War hero falls from grace, ends up invisible, emerges during crisis to save lives again. It writes itself. Daniel sat heavily on the couch. I just wanted to raise my daughter in peace, I know. But peace isn't an option anymore. You're visible now whether you want to be or not. Marcus leaned forward. So the question becomes, what do you do with that visibility? Survive it, same as everything else. Or use it. For what? For something that matters. Marcus pulled up different files on his tablet, architectural drawings Daniel recognized from Victoria's conference room presentation. The training center. She's serious about building it. Named it the Sterling Cross Center yesterday. Half for her father, half for you. I didn't agree to that. You saved her life. She doesn't need your permission to honor you. I don't want to be honored. I want to be left alone. Marcus studied him the way he'd studied him for months, seeing past the janitor disguise to the man beneath. What are you afraid of? I'm not afraid. Yes, you are. You've been afraid for 6 years. Afraid of failing. Afraid of wanting something. Afraid of admitting that you're more than what you've convinced yourself you deserve to be. The words landed like punches, accurate and painful. My hands don't work right. You've seen me drop, things spill coffee. I can't perform surgery anymore. Can't fly combat missions. Can't do any of the things that made me who I was. So become someone new. Someone who teaches the next generation instead of fighting the last war. I'm not a teacher. You taught your daughter to read, to dream, to survive losing her mother. You taught Victoria something about courage even when she didn't want to learn it. Marcus set down the tablet. Teaching isn't about credentials. It's about giving people what you wish someone had given you. And what's that? A reason to keep going when everything says to quit. They sat in silence while the implications settled. Through the wall, they could hear Maya moving around her room, probably drawing processing trauma the only way she knew how. Victoria wants to meet with you tomorrow, Marcus said. She's going to formally propose the training center, offer you director position. Salary, benefits, housing stipend if you need it. Everything you'd need to build something lasting. I haven't flown in 6 years. Simulator first. Prove to yourself you can still do it before you teach anyone else. What if I can't? Then you know. And knowing is better than wondering for the rest of your life. Daniel thought about Maya's drawings, her obsession with planes she'd never flown, dreams she inherited from a father too broken to pursue them himself. Thought about James Torres and the other veterans he'd seen on news reports, young men and women missing limbs, or minds struggling to find purpose after war used them up. Tell her I'll meet, but I'm not promising anything. Fair enough, Marcus stood headed for the door. One more thing. We found evidence of sabotage. Richard Kane paid a contractor to disable the safety interlocks on the fuel system. He wanted the demonstration to fail, just not catastrophically enough to cause injuries. He miscalculated, so arrest him. Victoria's handling it quietly. Board meeting Monday. Richard will resign or face criminal charges. That easy. Nothing about this is easy. Marcus opened the door, but at least it's over. After he left, Daniel checked on Maya. She'd fallen asleep with her pencil still in hand, notebook open to a new drawing. This one showed a building with people streaming through the entrance, aircraft visible through windows. Above the door, careful letters spelled out Daddy's School. He closed the notebook, gently turned off her light, returned to the couch where sleep refused to come. Saturday morning, Victoria's office. She'd come in despite the building being mostly empty, despite doctors recommending rest after her concussion. Daniel found her surrounded by files, plans, budgets for projects that existed only in her determination. She looked up when he entered, bandage still prominent on her forehead. You came. Said I would. Sit. Please. He sat across from her desk, same desk where her father had once run an empire, where she now fought to keep that empire from crumbling around her. I'm sorry. The words came quickly, practiced. For how I treated you. For the mop, the insults, all of it. There's no excuse. You already apologized. I want to apologize again. Properly. She stood, walked to the window overlooking the hangar, where firefighters had finally finished containment. I spent 6 months after my father died trying to prove I was strong enough to replace him. I thought strength meant being harder than everyone else, colder, more ruthless. She turned to face him. You showed me I was wrong. I didn't show you anything. You showed me what real strength looks like. Running into fire for someone you love, admitting mistakes, accepting help. Her voice cracked. My father would have liked you. He did like me. That's how I got the mop. A smile ghosted across her face. He kept your photograph. Did Marcus tell you that? From Nevada, he looked at it whenever he needed to remember what courage looked like. I just did my job. Nobody else did that job. Nobody else flew through that storm. Victoria returned to her desk, pulled out the architectural plans. I want to build something. Something that honors what you did, what you sacrificed. A place where veterans can find new purpose. Where kids from rough backgrounds can learn skills that'll actually change their lives. You showed me these before. I'm showing them again. With a formal offer. She slid a folder across the desk. Director of the Sterling Cross Training Center. Salary of $90,000 annually plus benefits. Housing stipend education fund for Maya. Full control over curriculum, hiring program structure. Daniel opened the folder, scanned numbers that would transform his life. This is too much. It's what the position requires. I'm not qualified. You're the most qualified person I know. You've lived what these people are going through. You understand what it means to lose everything and have to rebuild. Victoria, I haven't flown in 6 years, can't perform surgery anymore, can't even guarantee my hands won't shake when I need them steady. How am I supposed to teach anyone anything by showing them that broken doesn't mean finished? She leaned forward. Do you know what I saw yesterday in that fire? I saw a man who'd convinced himself he was nothing, move like someone who knew exactly what he was. You coordinated the rescue, found the exit, got us out. Those aren't janitor skills. Those are leadership skills or survival instincts. Same thing in the right context. Victoria pulled out another document. We've already secured funding. Pentagon wants this program. They've got thousands of veterans struggling to transition to civilian life. This could be a model for facilities nationwide. So there's pressure, expectations, ways to fail publicly. Welcome to my world. Daniel looked at the plans, the budgets, the vision Victoria had constructed from guilt and genuine desire to build something meaningful. It was everything he'd stopped letting himself want, everything that scared him precisely because it mattered. I need to know I can still fly. Not just theoretically. Actually, done. We'll set you up in our simulator. If you can pass the quals, you're hired. If you can't, we'll find another role that fits your capabilities. And if I fail completely, then you tried. That's more than most people do. He thought about Maya's drawing, her unwavering belief that her father could do anything if he just decided to try him on. Thought about James Torres and the veterans who needed someone to prove that second acts were possible. Okay, I'll test in the simulator. But Victoria, I need you to understand something. I'm not your father. I'm not going to run this place like he would have run it. Good, because I'm not my father either. Maybe it's time we both stopped trying to be ghosts and started being ourselves. Monday morning, Daniel sat in the simulator cockpit while technicians calibrated systems. Marcus supervised from the control room tablet, ready to record every data point. The cockpit wrapped around him like a memory familiar, despite the years, despite the upgrades and new interfaces. His hands found controls from muscle memory older than conscious thought. Throttle stick rudder pedals. The language of flight still fluent somewhere in his nervous system. You ready? Marcus's voice through the headset. No, good. Overconfidence kills pilots. Run through your pre-flight. Daniel's fingers moved across switches and readouts, checking systems in the sequence drilled into him by instructors who demanded perfection. Fuel hydraulics, electrical avionics, everything green. Initiate start sequence. The simulator rumbled as virtual engines spooled up. The canopy display lit with artificial horizon airspeed indicators. Altitude markers. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs, adrenaline flooding his system the way it used to before combat missions. His hands trembled. Take your time. Marcus's voice calm, steady. No rush. Daniel gripped the stick, felt a tremor in his fingers. 6 years of nerve damage. 6 years of convincing himself he'd never do this again. The stick vibrated with simulated engine feedback. He couldn't tell where his tremor ended and the simulation began. Clear for takeoff. He pushed the throttle forward. The simulator lurched G-forces, pressing him back into the seat as the virtual aircraft accelerated down the runway. Airspeed climbing, rotation speed. He pulled back on the stick, felt the aircraft respond, leave the ground, climb into digital sky. For 30 seconds, it was perfect. Smooth ascent, clean inputs, the kind of flying that looked effortless because 10,000 hours of practice had made it instinct. Then turbulence hit, simulated crosswind shear that required immediate correction. Daniel's hand moved to compensate, overshot, triggered a wing drop. He corrected again, too much, sent the aircraft into a shallow bank. His hand shook harder, betrayed by stress and old injuries. Recover and stabilize. Marcus's voice professionally neutral, giving him space to fix it. Daniel forced his breathing to slow, focused on smoothing his inputs. Small corrections. Easy pressure. The aircraft gradually steadied, returned to controlled flight. His hands still trembled, but the plane obeyed anyway. They flew for 40 minutes. Basic maneuvers first, then progressively harder scenarios. Emergency procedures, instrument failures, combat simulations. Daniel flew through all of it, sometimes rough, sometimes brilliant, always good enough. When he finally landed the simulator and climbed out, his shirt was soaked with sweat. Marcus met him in the debriefing room, pulled up performance data. You passed? Barely? Barely is still passing. Marcus showed him the graphs, the analysis. Your technical knowledge is perfect. Your decision-making is sound. The hand tremor affected precision, but not safety. You're cleared to fly training missions. Daniel stared at the data, proof that he could still do the thing he'd loved most, even if not at the level he once commanded. I'm not the pilot I was. No, you're different. Maybe better in ways that matter for teaching. How do you figure you've failed, you've struggled, you know what it's like to lose confidence and have to rebuild it? Marcus closed the tablet. Perfect pilots make terrible teachers because they can't understand why anyone would find flying hard. You can understand that now. So my weakness is a strength. Your experience is a strength. The weakness is just part of the package. Daniel thought about Maya, about the dreams he wanted her to have, the future he wanted to build for her. Thought about the veterans who needed someone to show them that broken could still mean capable. Tell Victoria I accept the position. You sure know, but I'm doing it anyway. That's how all the best decisions get made. Marcus extended his hand. Welcome aboard, Director Cross. They shook. Daniel felt the weight of the title, the responsibility it carried. He'd spent 6 years trying to be invisible, trying to need nothing from anyone. Now he'd have staff, students, budgets, expectations. The thought terrified him, but terror was familiar. He'd learned to function inside it. The Sterling Cross Center broke ground in March. Daniel spent those months designing curriculum, recruiting instructors, reviewing applications from veterans who'd heard about the program through military networks. The applicants' files read like variations on his own story: injuries that ended careers, PTSD that ended marriages, struggles to find meaning after war reduced them to civilians nobody knew how to employ. He selected 30 for the first class. James Torres was among them. The kid was 25, looked older, moved through the world with the careful navigation of someone who'd had to relearn how bodies worked. He rolled his wheelchair into Daniel's office on orientation day, file folder balanced on his lap. Director Cross, just Daniel, come in. James rolled closer, extended his hand. They shook Daniel, noting the grip strength, the steadiness. This was someone who'd done the physical therapy, put in the work, refused to let missing legs define his limitations. I saw you on the news. The fire. James's voice held awe and something else, hope maybe. You're the reason I applied. I'm just a guy trying to build something useful. You're a Silver Star recipient who flew missions nobody else would fly. James tapped his folder. I looked you up, read everything I could find. Most of it's classified. I know people who know people. James smiled. Point is, you did things, important things. Then you lost it all and kept going anyway. That's what I need to learn, how to keep going. How to believe I can. Daniel studied the young man, saw himself at 25 whole and certain before Afghanistan and Kandahar and all the ways war hollowed people out. What happened to your legs, IED, outside Kabul? I was on patrol just walking, then I was flying. Woke up 3 days later in Germany with half my body missing. I'm sorry, everyone's sorry. James's jaw tightened. But sorry doesn't help. Sorry doesn't give me a reason to wake up anymore. I need something harder than sympathy. What do you need? A mission? James met his eyes. I spent 2 years in physical therapy learning to walk on prosthetics. Got decent at it, can fake normal pretty well. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this capability. Don't know what I'm training for. What did you do in the Army Communications Specialist? Radio equipment, encrypted networks, technical stuff. We need someone to manage our simulator networks, set up training scenarios, maintain the hardware. It's not flying, but it's mission critical. James's eyes widened. You're offering me a job if you complete the program. Prove you can handle the work, the pressure, the reality that some days will be harder than others. What if I can't handle it, then we find something you can handle. Daniel leaned forward. James, this program isn't about being perfect. It's about finding what works for who you are now, not who you used to be. And if who I am now isn't good enough, then we build you into someone better. That's what training is. The first class officially started in late April. 30 students ages 22 to 48, all carrying wounds visible and otherwise. Daniel stood in front of them on opening day, feeling the weight of their expectations, their desperation to believe this could work. My name is Daniel Cross. I'm a former flight surgeon and combat pilot. I have nerve damage in my hands from a hospital bombing that ended my military career. His voice was steady, matter of fact. I spent 5 years working as a janitor because I convinced myself I wasn't capable of anything more. I was wrong. The students watched him, recognition flickering in faces that knew what it meant to feel worthless. This program exists because someone believed I deserved a second chance. Now I believe the same about you. We're going to teach you aerospace engineering, flight operations, technical skills that defense contractors actually need. But more than that, we're going to teach you that your service didn't end when you left the military. It just changed form. Over the next 6 months, Daniel discovered he was better at teaching than he'd been at flying. He could break down complex concepts, identify where students struggled, adjust methods until everyone understood. His own difficulties gave him patience. Others lacked empathy that helped students push through frustration. James Torres became his star pupil. The kid absorbed technical information like a sponge, excelled at simulator programming, developed training scenarios that challenged even the advanced students. By October, Daniel had offered him a permanent position on staff. "You sure about this?" James asked, surprised. "I haven't even graduated yet. You've already proven yourself. We need someone like you full-time. Someone in a wheelchair. Someone who understands what our students are going through. Who can model what's possible." James blinked hard, fighting emotion. "This means everything to me." "You know that I know." Daniel gripped his shoulder. "You've earned it. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The graduation ceremony was scheduled for mid-November. All 30 students had completed the program. Several had job offers already lined up with defense contractors. Others were continuing into advanced training. Every single one had proven that losing pieces of themselves in service didn't mean losing their futures. Victoria attended graduation, sat in the front row beside Maya, who'd grown 2 inches and gained confidence that radiated from every gesture. The girl had spent months at the center after school, had watched her father transform from invisible janitor to respected director. She'd seen proof that people could change, that hitting bottom wasn't the end. Daniel stood at the podium looking out at 30 graduates and the families who'd supported them through impossible months. He'd prepared remarks, formal words about achievement and in service. But looking at their faces, the prepared speech felt inadequate. A year ago, he began, "I was pushing a mop and pretending that was enough. Pretending I didn't want more, didn't deserve more, didn't have anything left to offer the world." He paused. "I was lying to myself. And maybe some of you have told yourselves similar lies." The room was silent, attentive. "We lose things in service. Limb stability, the ability to sleep without nightmares. We lose the people we were, come home as strangers to ourselves. And sometimes we decide that those losses define us, that who we were matters more than who we could become." Daniel looked at James Torres, at the other veterans who'd fought through pain and doubt to be here. "This program isn't about replacing what you lost. It's about discovering what you gained. The resilience to keep going. The courage to try again. The knowledge that broken doesn't mean finished, just different." His voice strengthened. "You are different now. Accept that. Own it. Use it to become someone you're proud to be." Maya watched from the front row, eyes bright with tears and pride. Victoria beside her transformed from the ice queen who'd thrown a mop into someone capable of building futures instead of defending legacies. "Being enough isn't about what you accomplish," Daniel said. "It's about showing up even when you're scared, even when you don't have answers, even when the whole world tells you to quit." He met each graduate's eyes. "You showed up. You did the work. You proved that you're enough exactly as you are. Now go prove it to everyone else." The applause started, slowly built into something thunderous. 30 graduates stood, families joined them, the whole room celebrating not just completion, but transformation. Daniel watched them, felt something shift inside himself, the final piece of grief and anger letting go. After the ceremony, Maya found him in his office. She'd been carrying her notebook, always carrying it, but now she opened to a fresh page and showed him a new drawing. This one depicted the center students entering aircraft visible through windows, and in the foreground a figure that was unmistakably him, standing tall, whole, no mop in sight. "You did it, Daddy. We did it. Couldn't have done any of this without you." She hugged him, fierce and tight. "I'm proud of you." The words broke something that had needed breaking. He held his daughter, this miracle who'd kept him alive through the darkest years, who'd believed in him when he'd stopped believing in himself. "I love you, sweetheart. More than all the stars. I know." She pulled back, smiled. "Mom would be proud too." Yeah, she would. Victoria knocked on the door frame, waited for invitation before entering. She changed out of her formal attire, looked more relaxed than Daniel had ever seen her. That was beautiful. The speech, it was true. That's all. Sometimes that's enough. She sat across from him. "The board approved funding for 3 more centers, East Coast, Midwest, West. They want to replicate what we've built here, what you've built," Daniel corrected. "I just run the program. We built it together. And we're going to build more, if you're willing." Daniel thought about 30 graduates, about James Torres now on staff, about the hundreds of veterans who might find purpose if the program expanded. Thought about Maya growing up in a world where her father did meaningful work instead of invisible labor. "I'm willing, but Victoria, I need something from you. Name it. Stop trying to be your father." He was great, but you're better. You're building things he never imagined. Own that, she smiled, genuine and unguarded. Only if you stop trying to be invisible. Deal. They shook hands as partners in something neither had imagined a year ago. Maya watched them seem satisfied, returned to her drawing. Outside, night had fallen. The center's lights illuminated the runway, where students would train tomorrow, practicing landings and takeoffs, learning to trust themselves again. Daniel watched through his office window, felt peace settle into spaces that had held only grief. His hands still trembled. Probably always would. But trembling hands had built this place, had taught 30 students, had proven that broken could still mean capable. Maya appeared beside him, slipped her hand into his. The tremor didn't matter. She held tight anyway. What are you thinking about? How far we've come. Are we home now? Really home? Daniel looked at his daughter, at Victoria, organizing files at his desk at the center that bore his name and his purpose. Thought about James Torres and the other graduates building futures from ruins. Yeah, sweetheart, we're home. And for the first time in 6 years, the words felt true.